Hi, I'm Maria from Sew Jewish. I'm going to demonstrate how to sew our Pomegranate Atarah and corner piece pattern for a Tallit or prayer shawl. And along the way, I'm going to give you a lot of great tips. We're going to start with the Atarah. I've just cut the piece of fabric from the pattern. And you'll notice that the pattern also serves as the placement guide for the applique pieces. You can see here all of the guidelines where the pomegranates and the leaves will go. So we're going to transfer these applique markings to the Atarah fabric. I'm going to lay the fabric on top and use a pencil to trace. A mechanical pencil works really well because it stays sharp, unlike a regular pencil. I can see these lines really well through this fabric. This is a light Dupioni silk fabric, but you can make the lines a bit easier to see if you need by putting a white piece of paper under, or you can hold the whole thing up to a window or put it on a light box. And I'm just going to go through and trace, going to go all the way across and trace all of these applique pieces. Now we finish the raw edge of the Atarah. First, we're going to sew around the perimeter of the Atarah 1/2 inch from the edge. Now we go around the very edge with some zigzag stitches to seal in those threads at the edge. I'm using a medium width zigzag stitch on a scale from 1 to 5. I'm using a 3, and the length I'm using on a scale from 0 to 5, I'm using a 1.5. And I'm centering the zigzag stitches. I'm centering the zigzag stitches on the edge of the fabric. And it's okay if the edges gather up a bit underneath the zigzag stitches. We're not going to see this raw edge. It's going to be pressed under on the final Atarah. But mostly what we're doing here is we are just sealing the edges so that they don't fray while we're doing the applique. Now we prepare the appliques. You'll notice that the motif has 3 different types of applique pieces. There's a pomegranate, there's a leaf attached to the pomegranate, and there's a second unattached or free leaf. So those are 3 different kinds we'll need to do. There are 7 of each on the Atarah, and then we have the 4 corner pieces, so we need 11 of each type. Now for the pomegranate, I have this pretty red, deep red Dupioni silk. For the attached leaf, I have a light green, and for the free leaf, I have a dark green. And this is how we create the appliques. I'm going to start with the pomegranate, and we have a pattern. Put aside the fabric for a moment, and we're going to work with the interfacing. Now this is not the kind of interfacing you would use with a cotton applique, because that would make the silk or the poly stiff and wouldn't really work great for a collar that we want to be flexible on the Atarah. So instead we use this sheer couture weight tricot interfacing. It has a smooth side, and then it has a more nubby side, which is an iron-on, has an iron-on. So we're going to start by putting the smooth side up on top of the pattern. Now take a ballpoint pen and trace the pattern using short strokes. Not long strokes, because you don't want to stretch the interfacing. And by the way, this interfacing is a kind that is not meant for stretchable fabrics. It will give a little bit, but it should not be the kind for stretchable fabrics. We don't really want to stretch a lot. And I'm going to trace 11 copies of this pattern on the interfacing. Now with 11 pomegranates traced onto the interfacing, we're going to iron the interfacing onto the applique fabric. I have the wrong side of the fabric facing up, and I have the smooth side of the interfacing facing up. As we had it when we traced it, the nubby side is down. That's the part that is going to attach or fuse the interfacing to the fabric. Now, use the instructions that come with your interfacing, but for mine, I'm going to use a medium heat, and I'm going to use a pressing cloth. And when you do this, hold it for about, I'm going to hold it for about 8 or 10 seconds. And then I'm going to move it to the next spot, but I'm not going to slide it. I'm going to pick it up and move it. If you slide it, you could end up stretching the interfacing and then warping your appliques. I'm going to do the whole thing like that. I'm going to go over the whole piece of fabric. Then when I'm done working on one side, I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to give it a pressing on the other side to get a really great seal. Don't press it too much, because if you, especially with the Du Peony silk, as you press it, you start to lose some of the texture. So just gentle is better. And then let that cool down in order to set really nicely. Now with the interfacing fused onto the back of the leaf appliques also, I'm going to cut all the appliques out along the pen lines. And now you can see that we've pinned the pomegranates in place on the Atarah using the pencil guide marks that we drew earlier. Now, if we were working with cotton, at this point we could probably just iron the appliques onto the background, but since we're working with silk, the interlining that we're using won't allow us to iron them on, so instead we're going to baste them in place before we finish the edges. Basically, we're just going to baste about 1/4 inch away from the edge, although we'll have to get a little bit closer at the tops of the pomegranates. And let me show you what I mean. This will show you what we're aiming for. On the top here, you're going to have to get closer than 1/4 inch to the edge, but that's okay. This is not so close that it's going to interfere with the stitching. Okay, the next step is to finish the raw edge of the appliques, and I've done the first one. I can show you what it looks like. Now you'll see we've used close zigzag stitches called satin stitches to go all the way around the edge of the pomegranate applique to finish off the raw edges. Now the instructions that come with the Pomegranate Atarah on the Sew Jewish shop have instructions for doing machine applique, tips to help you get great results. And you can also find a couple of great articles on the Sew Jewish blog, which is at sewjewish.com. But let me give you really quickly some quick tips for this project. We at Sew Jewish call this a pivot diagram, and I can use it to show you the finer points of getting great results appliquing the pomegranate on this project. We're going to start here on the bottom. You can imagine this is a blown-up version of what you see on your sewing machine. If we start here, this is going to be underneath the attached leaf in the finished project, so it's a good place to start. Start by taking some straight stitches backwards, and then switch to zigzag. You're going to want closer zigzags than are shown here, but this is just to show you the general idea. Now you'll notice as you start moving forward, the zigzag stitches aren't centered on the edge of the applique, but they are positioned so that the right-hand side of the zigzag lies in the background fabric right next to the edge of the applique. So most of the stitching is going to end up on the applique itself. So as we move forward on this curve, we're going to find that the needle is going to run off the edge unless we pivot. So as we work around this curve, a key is to pivot on the outside of the curve when the needle's on the outside. So you imagine the needle's going back and forth, and then at some point when you need to pivot, stop with the needle on the right-hand side and pivot a bit. Take a few more stitches, and with the needle in the right-hand side again, you can pivot and keep going forward, keep pivoting, and keep making your way all around this circle, always stopping with the needle in the right-hand position. You're going to work your way all the way around this curve. Now when you get to the top of the pomegranate, here we have an inside curve. We're going to be moving to the right. So go all the way past the corner. The distance that you go past the corner is the width of your zigzag stitches, and stop with the needle in the left-hand position. With the needle in the fabric, turn, start moving forward again, and you can see that the zigzags now are going to land in the right place with the edges, the right-hand edges just off the edge of the applique. Now, this curve moves in the opposite direction of the outside of the pomegranate. This is concave. So here, as we're moving along and we need to pivot, we're going to pivot on when the needle is on the left-hand side. All right, and it's just going to give you a nicer, fuller result, fuller threads. Now, when we get to this corner, which is an outside corner, and we're turning to the left, we stop when the needle is just at the corner in the right-hand position, and we pivot. And then we move around this next curve, which is a convex curve, just like the outside of the main pomegranate. So we're pivoting when the needle is in the right-hand position. And when we get to this inner corner, we're moving to the right, we stop with the needle on the left-hand side, and we pivot, and we keep moving around these curves and points in the same way as we did the previous ones. Now, one thing to notice is that this point and this point are a bit sharp. So if you're working with wide zigzag stitches, you may find that the stitches are running off the edge of the opposite side of the applique as you're working. If that's the case, when you get close to the point, switch to a narrower zigzag and then pivot as normal. Take a few more stitches with the narrower stitch, and then switch to a wider stitch where the fabric gets wider, and continue on. All right, and then once you've gotten to the bottom of the pomegranate, this is a right-hand turn in inner corner. So we go past the corner, a distance that is equal to the width of the zigzag again, and with the needle in the left-hand position, we pivot, and then we continue around the whole rest of the pomegranate in the same way we did before. Okay, so let's applique one of these pomegranates. I'm starting in this bottom section near the leaf, and I'm going to start with a couple of straight stitches backwards. Now I switch to zigzag, and I start moving forward. When you've got all of the pomegranates appliqued, then move on to the leaf appliques. Do the attached ones next. Baste them all down and finish the edges. And then do the unattached free leaves. Baste them down through the middle and then finish the edges. And a quick tip, you'll notice that all of the curves on all of the leaves are convex curves. So when you are doing the machine applique and you're working these curves, you're always going to pivot when the needle is on the right side. And when you do these appliques, don't cut the ends of the thread short like we did with the pomegranate. Leave them long and I'm going to show you what we're going to do with them for an extra nice finish. I've just finished appliquing the last leaf, and I'm going to show you something special you can do to end the threads when you finish an applique. You don't have to do this on most kinds of appliques that you do, but I think it's a nice thing to do on a special project like a Tallit. And that is, don't cut the last threads totally short. Instead, use a hand needle, thread a hand needle, and push these top threads to the back. Oops, let me try that again. Okay. Alright, that's one, and now the thread that I started with, thread it in the needle. Alright, and I bring it to the back. And I trim it from the back. And that saves you from having even the smallest bit of extra ending thread on the front. And I think not only does it look slightly nicer and more refined, but when you're wearing the Tallit, or if you're giving the Tallit to someone you've made it for, it's just nice to know, I think, that you've taken a little extra step to make it extra special. It's one of the benefits, I think, of handcrafting an item rather than purchasing it. It's just, I think, a really special thing to do. Now, the next thing we're going to do is remove the basting stitches that held the applique on. Hold all the appliques on. So work from the back, just so that in case if you pull any threads, you're pulling threads from the back fabric and not the front. Alright, do all of the pomegranates and all of the leaves. And if you see that there may be tiny pinholes left in the fabric from the thread, just use your fingers to sort of rub over it and they will come out. Alright, go ahead and finish that up and then we'll do the next step. The final step in preparing the Atarah is to press under the edges along the stitches that we sewed earlier. You can turn the stitches a little bit to the back so that they won't show when you sew the piece to your Tallit. And you don't need to use very hot iron. And if you're using the Du Peony silk, the textured silk, like we're using here in this demonstration, be careful not to press it too much, then you start to lose some of that great texture in the fabric. Alright, I'm going to turn it over and just give these edges a nice extra crisp finish. And there you go, it's finished. And with this finish, you can go ahead and do the corner pieces. And the corner pieces are going to look just like this, same technique. And with the Atarah and the corner pieces done, we're ready to sew them to your Tallit. I'm going to show you how to sew the Atarah and corner pieces onto a Tallit using another Tallit that I'm working on. You can see this is a narrow shawl style Tallit, the kind that you wear around your neck, and it hangs in the front like a scarf. Here it has an Atarah on it and corner pieces. And just by way of explanation, this section here is going to be the tassels when I remove the crosswise threads. So here's our short edge. Let's start with the Atarah. It goes in the middle of one of the long sides. Easiest way to find the middle is to fold it in half and put a pin at the fold. Do the same thing with the Atarah. Fold it in half and put the point where the fold is right where your pin is. And a quick point on orientation with this Pomegranate Atarah. Orient it so that this middle pomegranate, the one that is right in the middle that's going to sit at the back of your neck, is straight up. And then you'll see that when it's worn over around the neck, these two pomegranates at the middle are going to face upward and outward. And once you've got the Atarah pinned onto the tallit, just go ahead and sew it on by sewing around the entire perimeter about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Now the corner pieces. The placement of the corner pieces is going to be different depending on whether you're doing a narrow shawl style tallit like this one, which is just worn draped around the neck, or whether you're doing a large tallit that you wear around your neck and then toss back the front corners over your shoulder. Let's do the narrow one first, since that's what we have in front of us. In this case, for narrow tallits, place the corner pieces on the same side of the tallit as the Atarah, as they are here. Just pin it in place, and in this case the bottom of the pomegranate is closest to the edge. Pin them all on and then sew them to the tallit about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, all the way around the perimeter. Now, if you are making a large tallit, you want to put the corner pieces on the opposite side of the tallit as when you put the Atarah. Here's the Atarah. Turn it over and put the corner pieces here on the other side as you did for the narrow one. The reason is that once the wearer tosses this over the shoulder, you want the corner piece to show, which in this case is the back or the opposite side of the tallit as the Atarah. Other than that, it's the same as with the narrow tallit. Just pin it in place, pin all the pieces in place with the bottom of the pomegranate close to the edge, and sew the piece in place all the way around the perimeter about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. The last step is sewing holes in the middle of all the corner pieces for the tzitzit strings on your tallit. Now, if your machine has an automatic setting for making eyelets or making circular stitches, you can use that to sew a 1/4 inch diameter hole of reinforced stitches in the middle of each corner piece. If you don't have an automatic setting, use the technique I'm going to show you now that we developed at So Jewish for making really neat tzitzit holes very easily. I'm going to do this as if the corner piece was already on the tallit. Same technique as if it was sewn on. Now you'll notice I have here the pattern that we used to cut out the corner pieces, and I've cut along the dotted lines that are on the pattern. And I'm going to use this as a placement guide for making the tzitzit holes. You'll notice on the pattern there is a blue hexagon. That is our sewing pattern for the hole. What we do is we line the pattern up on the corner piece, match up the bottoms, and then center it horizontally. It's probably not going to be exactly the same size. Ideally, it's exactly the same size horizontally, but probably not exactly, so center it horizontally, and then move it to your machine. Now we start sewing with straight stitches that are, the length should be on a scale from 0 to 5, I'm going to use a 2. And we start with the needle in one of the corners of the hexagon. I'm going to take a couple of stitches backwards, and then I'm just going to sew along the hexagon, pivoting at the corners. Go all the way around the 6 sides. Alright, now when we've gotten back to the beginning, keep the needle in the fabric, raise the presser foot, and rip this pattern away from the fabric. You're going to want to get the bits, if you can, from inside this hexagon, but if you can't, that's okay. You can remove it later. But it generally comes out pretty easily. Once you've got the pattern torn away, cut these beginning threads off so they don't get cut off in the stitches of the next stage. With the presser foot down, needle up, and now I'm going to switch to the short, the closed zigzag stitches, the satin stitches, like we did for the applique. And for the width, I want it about 2, and the length, like with the satin stitches, very close together. Now I'm going to trace with the zigzag stitches, the straight stitches that we made before. And when you get to the corner, stop with the needle in the right hand side, lift your presser foot, pivot, put it back down, and do the next side. And do all 6 sides in the same way. So the tzitzit strings will go right through this hole. You can find the Pomegranate Atarah and corner piece pattern in the Sew Jewish shop at sewjewishshop.com. And if you'd like to know when we post new videos, we invite you to subscribe. Thanks for watching.